Today, we're going to take a look at some news and notes from around the league and talk about how they may affect the Detroit Tigers. Some big news earlier this week. A pair of players from the NPB officially will be posted by their teams and be free agents this winter. So we'll talk about that. And we will talk a little bit of Andy Ibáñez 2025 all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Thursday, October 23rd, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Just download the app today. Welcome in, everybody. Over halfway through the week yet again, already Thursday now. Today, we are going to discuss a few different things, some notes and honestly big news from around baseball and kind of how that could affect the game of baseball, how that could affect the Detroit Tigers, etc. And then we'll end the show by talking about Andy Ibáñez and his 2025 and what the future holds for Andy Ibáñez in the Tigers organization. We're going to start off with some managerial news, however. The San Francisco Giants have hired Tony Vitello. Huge moment for baseball, man. For both landscapes as well, right? NCAA and Major League Baseball. Both of those landscapes have the possibility of changing forever because of this. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic and you know, trying to make this sound like it's the biggest deal on the planet Earth right now, but I do think that this is a massive deal for the game of baseball. The NCAA effect is pretty obvious. Vitello ran one of the most successful baseball programs in the entire country. Year in and year out, were a powerhouse right at Tennessee, and it really flourished under him. If you follow college baseball in any capacity, you are aware of this. Even if you don't, you probably are kind of aware of this. They are an absolute powerhouse, and Vitello is a really big reason for that. So obviously Tennessee is the biggest, and the Giants are the two teams that are affected the most by this. What happens to Tennessee, I think, is fascinating. I could probably talk for 30 minutes if this was, Locked On college baseball. I could probably talk for 30, 40 minutes just about that. Like the SEC is so good these days. Vandy, Alabama in recent years, Texas A&M, obviously LSU, Arkansas, Florida. Like there's so much good baseball there that any sort of crack in the armor is probably going to be taken advantage of by its interconference foes. And so I'm really interested in who they bring in. I feel like you kind of need a big name or they could just say, you know what, the system is the system and promote from within. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see what happens as far as recruiting and commits and stuff. Obviously, with him leaving, that could change a lot in that aspect as well. So huge hit for Tennessee. But the biggest question with this is, will it be something that happens going forward? That is why it is such a big deal to me, and that is why it is such a big deal for people that follow the game of baseball. College to MLB in terms of managers does not happen very often in the history of baseball. And Tennessee, again, has become a juggernaut under Vitello. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I'm just saying it's rare up to this point in history. And if it works, you might literally be able to point to one hire and go, that is where kind of the landscape of where Major League Baseball teams get their managers from changed. And if it works, there's a real chance you could see a lot more of that going forward. other college managers taking this path, and MLB front offices also start considering, college managers a lot more when they have openings in that regard. It could also be a thing where, coaches, and like we've seen coaches a little bit more, right? Or managers in college turn into coaches at the professional level, or like Chris Fetter, for instance, even Robin Lund, right? Like we've seen that's been happening for ages, right? But manager to manager is really an interesting path. And if it doesn't work, then I would imagine that not much changes, right? And college managers could, I guess, take the path that has been laid out for them, which is either you reach, SEC manager and you kind of just stop because you're making millions of dollars, or you then become a coach at the professional level and work your way up that way. So I don't want to put the future of managers on one dude's shoulders. That's not, again, I'm not trying to make this out to be, the biggest story ever today. It's just because obviously that's not the case. And obviously the whole fate of the job is, and the future of the position is not in his hands. But I really do think that this is a big deal for Major League Baseball and college baseball. So I'm going to be paying very close attention to what happens over there. And in terms of, the Giants, like Buster Posey, it continues to make outside of the box moves. And, does this affect the Tigers? Not in the short term, right? Obviously, the Tigers are happy with AJ Hinch. They've extended him twice in the last few years. Just extended him literally this season. So presumably this is not something that will affect our organization for at least the foreseeable future. But I do think that it does affect baseball. And I love stuff like this. I absolutely love outside of the box moves that you don't see very often. And for as much as I just every time I look at the Giants, part of me, dies inside because of what they did when I was, 14 years old in 2012, and Posey, obviously a big part of that as well. But you got to give, well, I say credit where credit is due for the non-traditional thought that goes into this. I love watching the game develop and evolve, and this is obviously a part of that if it works. If it doesn't, then the pie is on Buster Posey's face, and he's going to have to face the music in that regard. And they're going to be back on a managerial hunt in a year or two if it doesn't work. So we'll see what happens there. I do also want to talk about some news that came out from Yahoo Sports Japan on Wednesday involving this year's NPB class. So we're talking about players that NPB is the Professional Baseball League in Japan. In my eyes, it is the second best league on the planet Earth. And I think that over the last 3-4, really, I guess, especially since Ohtani came over, the free agent classes out of Japan and the players that have been posted every season just seem to get, better and better. And you're seeing more and more stars come over the last, however long that is, 5, 7, 8-ish years. So I want to talk about two big name players that are coming over this winter, and if the Tigers could be in play for either of them. We will do that right after this. First, though, I'm going to talk to you all about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel. There's so many ways to play and so many ways to bet. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines that they have available during games. It makes watching football and really any sport even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Also got to talk to you about our friends over at Rougiette. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've heard them all before. It's just stress, or I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiette makes it so you can get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online. There's no awkward waiting rooms and no in-person appointments. And if prescribed, your treatment ships directly to your door. So visit rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB to get 15% off of your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnMLB. Don't forget to use our code LockedOnMLB so they know that we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day, and we will, of course, be back tomorrow for a Friday show. Tomorrow's show is going to be the biggest questions heading into the Tigers offseason. The World Series obviously starts on Friday, so we're going to kind of kick off the World Series with the biggest questions surrounding the Tigers, because this offseason moves fast, man. Like this period of time right now is kind of like the dead time for 28 other teams. But the second that the World Series ends, it's like, boom, there's a deadline 48, 72 hours away. So want to make sure we get out ahead of that with our big picture conversations heading into the winter. Today, we talk about some news and notes from around baseball. The next thing I want to bring up is how intriguing I think this free agent class out of the NPB is. The biggest name this year is certainly Munetaka Murakami. This is, a guy that played in the World Baseball Classic, is a guy that is legitimately one of the most dominant players in NPB history already, and he's 25 years old currently, will be 26 over the offseason. So next year will be his age 26 season. Multiple MVPs, 55 home run season over there, which is the NPB all-time record for a player born in Japan. And he homered in the World Baseball Classic final against USA. And that was 3 years ago now already. So he's incredible. He's a big body, I think 6'1" or 6'2", over 200 pounds, plays third base and plays first base, but mostly has played third in Japan. He's a lefty bat. Like I said, next year he will be 26. And also, because of his age and how many years of service he has in the NPB at this point, he will be a true free agent. So it will be much more similar to the Yamamoto sweepstakes as opposed to the Sasaki sweepstakes, right? Sasaki was still very young, and so when he came over, it was as an international free agent. He's getting paid out of international pool money from the Dodgers, whereas Yamamoto's getting $315 million and had a bidding war and everything. So it will be much more like the latter. It will be a true free agent bidding war type of scenario. The concern with him, if there is one, is strikeouts. He strikes out quite a lot already in Japan, and that may only increase against MLB pitching and MLB velocity, really. That consistent velo is a heck of an adjustment for people that play overseas when they first come over. So his walk numbers, they've been good his whole career. They also dropped off a pretty decent amount this past season, like 5 or 6%, but they were so high that they did that, and they're still well over league average. Draws walks, hits absolute bombs, hits for a really good average, gets on base, etc. He again, like multi-time MVP winner before his 25th birthday. Like he's phenomenal. I would obviously be thrilled if the Tigers signed him, but I don't anticipate that they will be in on him. If you were holding your breath waiting for that comment, I apologize to burst your bubble, but he will likely end up in a big market that is willing to pay him a lot of money. It'll be fun to watch kind of how the offseason unfolds in regards to him. The only thing that I will say, and to put a bow on him and move on to other players here, is like at least we have seen the Tigers be a little bit more active and aggressive with international free agents in the Scott Harris era. I, like they're actually listed as potential suitors, and they're actually listed as potential, like finalists for some of these guys over the last couple of years. But that also hasn't amounted to much yet. In the same breath, they haven't actually got any of them or signed any of them. You're seeing the international free agent work being put in at like Dominican Republic level and the Venezuelan level, right? Like they are getting a lot more Puerto Rico, a lot more of those, like 15, 16-year-old kids to sign and have improved their international free agent class in that regard. This year, they signed maybe the best prospect they've ever signed in an international free agent class from places like that. However, in Japan, they're still kind of waiting to be bigger players in that market. Now, a player that I think is a lot more obtainable for the Detroit Tigers is Kazuma Okamoto. The reason why it's more intriguing to me is just because it's more realistic for the Tigers. I don't anticipate they will be the favorite on him. I still would not put my money on the Tigers bringing him in. However, the reason we're having this conversation today, with the World Series still yet to be played, and these guys haven't even, officially, their signing period is obviously nowhere close to starting yet, is because Yahoo Sports Japan did just announce on Wednesday that Okamoto would also be posted, right? We've known for a while. I mean, we've kind of known for years at this point that Murakami was going to get posted, and certainly have known for all of this year that he was going to get posted. But, the rest of the class was kind of up in question. And so Okamoto, I think, is a guy that is a really intriguing ad. 29 years old, has had some great numbers in Japan for his entire career. Another guy that homered off of Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, and he is a right-handed hitter as opposed to a lefty. The biggest difference here in profile is, well, Okamoto doesn't hit, 55 home runs. That's a potential generational power, obviously, in Murakami. But Okamoto hardly struck out this past year. And I think that that's a big thing and a big reason why when we go through this winter, he is going to be on a lot of people's wish list for the Detroit Tigers. Has played a lot of first base, has played a lot of third base in his NPB career. Now, lately, it's been a lot more first base, and he's been getting like accolades for how good he is defensively at first base lately. But when he first came up, played third, has played, like I said, plenty of third in his professional career, put up 30-plus home run seasons in 6 consecutive years. He was injured a little bit last year, so that came to an end. But it gives you a little bit more of the contact profile you want. He only struck out, I think it was 33 times this past season. Now, again, injury, didn't play a full season either, but it's still over 90 games played. So you're getting a lot more of a lot less swing and miss, hopefully, in that bat. You're getting fewer walks as well, but you are still getting legitimate pop with a little bit more bat to ball skills in there. The kicker, obviously, is, do you have an actual spot for him? Are you comfortable with how he plays third base? I don't think they would sign a guy who is 29 and never played Major League Baseball before to just replace Torkelson after a 30-homer season, but I've been fooled before. Like, I'm not necessarily like absolutely in love over the thought of like Torkelson being this team's 3 or 4 hitter next season. So I don't know. There's a lot of nuance that comes with this conversation. It depends on a lot of different factors. You want him in the field. He's a solid defender. Again, a really good one at first base. Presumably at 29, still athletic enough to be a solid third baseman, which I think if the Tigers were to be in on him, would be what they would want, best case scenario in that regard. So a lot of great articles out about both of these gentlemen. Thomas Harrigan of MLB.com, Mark Feinsand, who's one of the biggest baseball writers on the planet at MLB.com, has written about them. Maria Torres of The Athletic also has a couple of articles on these guys. So go check all of those out. I used a lot of those resources myself when doing my show prep for this, but it'll be super interesting to keep an eye on, man. I wanted to have the convo today just while the iron was hot with the news on Wednesday that Okamoto was going to be posted. But we'll have this conversation, I'm sure, plenty more throughout the offseason and the winter, when we start talking about free agents and free agent profiles and are there a fit and what position and et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like since this is in the news now, might as well tackle it today. Anything else? Let's get into Andy Ibáñez, okay? We'll do his 2025 player review right after this. First, though, going to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks. This episode brought to you by Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. So don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is so much fun. It's a simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like if Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushes for a touchdown, all of a sudden you're in the game. I love how quick it is. You can start and make your lineup in under a minute. There's so many great features as well. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment. Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. One more kind of funny note, I guess, before we get into Andy Ibáñez. Two former Tigers who are guaranteed a World Series this year. Okay, there's a handful. Actually, Evan Woodbury of M Live put out a fantastic piece and tweet, as he does every year, kind of highlighting all of the players who have ever played or been a part of the Tigers organization that are now a part of the World Series teams. So go check that out. Go support Evan Woodbury. He's just one of the best in the biz. But one of the really funny, I guess is the word, things is that Buddy Kennedy and Jose Urena both played for the Dodgers and the Blue Jays in this season, in the year 2025. So they are both guaranteed to be World Series champions. Shout out Buddy Kennedy, man. Shout out Jose Urena, too. Urena Tigers' tenure wasn't that great, unfortunately, but has kind of revitalized his career a little bit and, has been an okay depth arm for a couple of teams over the last 4 or 5 years. Buddy Kennedy, man. Buddy Kennedy just has bounced around to seemingly half of baseball. Diamondbacks, Phillies, Tigers, Dodgers, Blue Jays, keeps finding work and has some tools to be a solid player like that. So congratulations to those two on, no matter what happens, being World Series champions in the year 2025. Let's talk Andy Ibáñez's 2025. He is 32 years old at the time of this recording. He hit .239 with a .301 on base percentage and a .352 slug. That is a .653 OPS. Was just hardly better than a replacement level player in the eyes of WAR. Almost had the exact same, literally 1 point off from the exact same OPS that he had in 2024 in 2025. But this was actually, believe it or not, despite the fact that his OPS was actually a point better in 2025 than 24, I think this was a worse year for Andy Ibáñez than it was in 2024. And you're asking why? That doesn't make any sense. He hit better. His OPS dropped by about 100 points against left-handed pitching. Went from 802 to 714. The reason why his OPS went up is because he raised his OPS against right-handed pitching. It went from 407 to 507. I do not care about 407 to 507, literally at all. That's just improving from garbage to awful. That doesn't do anything for me. He's still not good against righties. He still does not hit them hardly ever. And Hinch is still not going to put him in the game against right-handed pitching. So, like, I don't care. Like, if it went from 600 to 700, then that would be a big deal. That's like below average to average. That is a big, improvement for his deployment and his usage and when Hinch uses him. And that's like, okay, Andy Ibáñez can start against righties. 407. I just hit my mic. I'm so passionate about this for some reason. 407 to 507 just does nothing for me. He is still nearly unplayable against right-handed pitchers and does not get at-bats against them because of that. It is certainly not worth his OPS against lefties going from well above average at 802 to just around average at 714. I would much rather he replicated what he did. I would legitimately rather his OPS was 0 against righties if it meant that his lefty OPS was like 900. That is where his value is. Now, in terms of the profile, we know the drill at this point. We're a couple years into the Andy Ibáñez experience. He doesn't strike out very often. He plays solid defense, kind of all over the diamond. Played first base, second base, and third base this year. Got some looks in the outfield in spring training that didn't really translate to anything. I think he played an inning or two at short this year. Now that was, just lineup manipulation for Hinch matchup ball, but still the fact that like that's even everything. There you go. He can play all over, and he was actually he was a plus defender this year. So you have that going for you. Again, for a team that really wants to cut down its strikeouts, he does not strike out very often. He also hit over 300 with runners in scoring position. All of those things have value, right? The team is trying to limit strikeouts. Andy does that. He is a righty, which is a team need. The team is trying to add more right-handed hitters to this lineup. And the reason for that is because they want to hit lefties better. And he hits lefties well. Like, I don't know. I expect him to be back in 2026, at least for spring training. But the drop-off against left-handed pitching is concerning because that is kind of where all of his value resides, right? Like if he's not hitting lefties, what is the value that he is providing on a game-to-game basis on the roster? Next to none. So the second that he stops doing that on a consistent basis is when, he loses said value. So I don't know. I think he probably makes it through the winter, although I wouldn't be totally stunned and surprised if he didn't. I think that it might more so be a guy that makes it through the winter on the 40-man still, gets to spring training, and then, I don't know, maybe spring training determines his future a little bit more. He's also going to be 33 next year. Like, I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if he made it through the winter. Then, like, if he did poorly against lefties in spring, then he was one of those guys that's cut or DFA'd right before opening day. There's always a big flurry of DFAs right like 2 days before opening day after spring training ends. So maybe he's something like that. Look, like ultimately, I'm fine with him being on the team next year if they want. But my biggest thing is just please improve the lineup to a point where he is not like batting 2 or 3 or 4 or lead off against lefties. Like he is a good complementary utility player. He should not be the star of your lineup when a lefty is on the mound, man. And if they do believe that the lefty production is going to continue dipping, then, maybe he doesn't make it through the winter. But I don't need a guy whose OPS was 720 against left-handed pitching to be, the cleanup hitter or the 2-hitter in my lineup next year. I'm good on that. I think it's time we again, like if he wants to hit 7 or 8 and be the platoon guy in the bottom half of the lineup, beautiful. Okay, again, plus defender. He brings a decent amount to the team when he's hitting lefties. Okay, I'm just repeating myself at this point, which I do all the time, and I apologize for that. I think that's pretty much it. World Series starts tomorrow. It'll be fun. we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Friday with another show. After you make us your first listen, make Locked On MLB Game Night your second listen. Every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB YouTube if you want to see it while they're literally live, or wherever you get your podcasts. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch y'all tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.